Well, some dogs just want all of you, don't they? You're petting one of them, and the other guy pushes his way in. Somebody might growl or even snap. Well, you can forget about being a referee of canine conflicts. It doesn't work anyway. We're going to get to dogs in just a minute. I want to talk to you about cats for just a second, like this little guy here. Tony, come here, baby. Come in. You come back up here. Come in. That's a good boy. He likes to go around behind me. If you've shared these events with me in the past, you know that, well, Miss America has passed on, but we still have Tony and Gaston. And normally we have them both here. And when they were first, introduced to these Facebook Lives a year and a half ago or so, they were, oh, look, it's, oh, good. I think, oh, it's Ann Manners. It's my wonderful sister-in-law from Tulsa. And Ann, I can take this to mean, I hope, that you can hear me. Last week we had our technical difficulties, but I think we're all right this time. So anyway, here's the thing. These guys, when they were, a year and a half younger, got this upstairs office in our house where I do this kind of stuff, and they didn't want to come in here. So we lured them in with a little bit of food, and it didn't take long before they thought, well, this is where we get dry food, because normally they're fed canned food. Has more moisture, and cats are less prone to kidney disease, lower urinary disease, if they take in more fluid. And they will do that if they have canned food, which costs more. Oh, you can hear me fine. Thank you, Ann. I appreciate that tremendously. Oh, and wonderful. So, Cindy, hey, thank you for tuning in. It's always great to see you. So anyway, now these cats developed this thing into sort of a feeding frenzy. They would start to compete for food, and we got these little hunting feeders. Tony T, here, baby. And Tony, what I'm trying to do, there we go, is lure him into participating without feeling like he has to compete with his brother who's, in the utility room waiting this one out. And next week we're going to swap and see how this goes. And if you folks show up every week, you might see progress. I hope. Cats can be trained. People assume they cannot. Whoops. And it's largely the same process with any creature, human or whatever the species. They're operant learners, but they are a little different, aren't they? Tony, here, baby. So he says, well, look, if there's food, I might do this. So, by the way, if anybody's had dogs, now we're getting a little bit highly aroused, so we're going to stop with the food for a little bit. And, people, by the way, they tend, he just took a swing at me. His claws were out a little bit. There was no injury, but I felt the claw. And there's a tendency that people have to reprimand or, hit a cat or spray it with water. And the thing is that when they start to get agitated, and then you institute some kind of an aversive, they end up starting to associate hostility and aggression and agitation with a particular context. Going forward, what we're trying to do with our cats, Tony here and Gaston, who you'll see again next week, is to teach them that, oh no, this is a very calm emotional state that happens here. And you can see he's a little bit tuned up right now, and I have a tendency to gesticulate when I speak. And those quick hand movements with many cat parents, the cats go for the hands. And it's not like you have to change your habits, but you have to change the context. So he just jumped down onto the floor. I'm just going to let him take a break. I mean, here we are, a veterinarian talking about pets, and I don't have any pets on screen right now. But he'll be back, and we'll reinforce him for being calm. And by the way, if he starts to get highly agitated on my lap, what I'm going to do is simply stand up, let him fall off my lap onto the floor. He will land on his feet because he's a cat, and we will end the interaction just like that. Okay? We will not punish, but we'll try setting him up for success again just a little later. So, dogs who compete. Sometimes people call this jealousy. It is not. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But does anybody here have that problem? Let me know if you do, and we can address that directly. Swipe left. There we go. Carla and Portia. Wonderful. Portia, you were on our Zoom group conference just yesterday, and I have to apologize. We were running that until 5 o'clock. I'm really glad you tuned in. We do those nearly every Wednesday afternoon as Zoom groups. It's much less expensive than an individual consultation, and it can be quite helpful for many people. And we had Portia in there talking about her dog and and 3 other people, 2 other people. Thank you for the hearts. And we were doing fine. And it was to run until 5, and at 4:59 everything went away. And we have Comcast here, and I'm complaining a little bit about Comcast because they do our phone service and our internet, and the whole thing went down until I think 1 o'clock this morning is when it came back. So Portia, I don't want you to think I hung up on you, because I was talking to you and explaining a point. I was almost finished making it, and it was gone. So if you still have a question on that, by all means type it into the comment line. We'll address it right here. So I'm really glad you're here. And also we have, let's see, who else is here? And Carla, thank you for coming. Aphrodite gets jealous if I'm holding a child in my lap. We're going to talk about that, okay? I'm really glad you brought that up, because it doesn't have to be other dogs. So, anyway, by the way, if anybody here has not met me, I am Dr. Jeff Nickel. I'm a veterinarian, and I am residency trained in behavior medicine, which makes me a veterinary behaviorist. And Carla, Portia, you're welcome. So, and then we have Tony, and he'll be back in a minute. So Carolyn is behind the scenes here trying to wrangle this cat and see what we can accomplish. So anyway, what I want to do is read you a story. Thank you, Carolyn. Here you go, Tony T. There. So we'll call him Tony T because, well, he's going to be 15. That's right. He's going to be 15 in November. And 15 years ago, our sons were, well, 15 years younger than they are now. They would have been early adolescents, like 12 and 13. And so we got this kitty, and we were going to let them name him. And they wanted to call him Tony after Tony the Tiger, even though he's not orange. So he's Tony T. Anyway, this is the story about 2 dogs. One is Ranger, one is Opie. Ranger's about 9.5, Opie's about 4. Both of them are shepherd mixes, or at least we think so. And their people are Susie and Jimmy. Really nice people, very committed to their. So let me set this thing up for you. Ranger was adopted 9 years ago. He was only 2 months old when they adopted him. And Opie, they've had him for a couple of years, and he was an adult already. He was a year and a half. And that probably plays into this, because not only do genetics play a significant part in many behavior disorders and just personality traits, but so do environmental exposures. You know, this old nature versus nurture argument. It's not one or the other at all. It is always both, but is it 50-50, 70-30? It depends on the behavior or the behavior disorder. But the fact that the younger guy, Opie, he's the bigger problem here. And we don't really know what kind of life he had before these folks adopted him, Susie and Jimmy. So about 1 year prior to me seeing them, Ranger and Opie had started sparring in the kitchen. They'd been okay, or at least their people thought so. They hadn't seen any overt indicators of aggression or snarky comments between them. At least they didn't notice that. And so about a year ago, they began to notice that when Susie and Jimmy were in the kitchen preparing meals, they started to notice this general tension. And that tells me that, you know, I mean, who else is trained to recognize body signaling of other species? Well, that's part of my job, but not most pet parents. They don't know, right? So they finally noticed when this thing was escalating. And so, you know, people immediately, they told the dogs, hey, you stop that. I don't want to see that kind of, you know, staring and tension and what they already recognized as threatening postures. And people do that for a very good reason, and that is because that's the way the human brain works. You know, if we have children or maybe a subordinate in the workplace and we see something that's not done the right way, and we want the person to do the thing the right way. So we go, don't do it like that, do it like this. You know, most of the time you only have to say that a time or two, and the person, if they really want to get along with their boss, they stop doing this and they start doing this. So people do that with their dogs. The trouble with dogs is that it's different than humans, and it isn't a problem. It's a difference. and that is that they regard any response from a leader as a validation of their behavior and of their emotional state of that moment. So if you don't want a behavior, do not respond to it, because your dog will come away with a clear message that that's a paycheck. So if you respond to behaviors you like, you'll see more of them. And if you respond to behaviors you don't want, you'll see more of those. Okay? So, bear with me here. So, the dogs have fought immediately after Susie has dropped food on the floor. Food-related aggression. That's actually not so abnormal. Its motivations can be, but dogs, they have survived as a species through all manner of harsh environments for millennia in every part of the world, and there's a variety of reasons why they've been so adaptable, but one of them is this concept of scarcity, this belief that everything but air to breathe and water to drink is a scarce resource. And there's a problem with that sometimes, though, because they'll hoard and they'll compete, and if they're not high-ranking, they'll be crafty. They're even known to set up a diversion so that they can get food when the higher status dog isn't paying attention. I mean, they do what it takes to survive. But there is this concept of scarcity, and our domestic dogs have that too. So you get this confined space, in other words, a room inside a house. It smells like food because they're cooking in there. That raises the tension. There are two dogs, and each of them believes that if I don't get all of it, I won't get any of it, and I'll be the guy who does not make it this year. And you think, well, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, right? I mean, these folks make a good income. They are not going to run out of dog food. That human logic is lost on our dogs, so you can forget trying to drive that message home. Dogs believe that they absolutely must compete. Thank you, Carolyn. So, Tony, well, we're luring him, or at least we're trying to. So these dogs, they drop a piece of food on the floor while they're cooking, and the dogs immediately start to squabble. Well, that's a problem, isn't it? So, this problem began to advance. This is when they started to take it seriously and scheduled a consultation, to the point where Opie was staring at and advancing on Ranger. These are pretty big dogs. They're German Shepherd crosses. In many areas of the house. In other words, it was generalizing. It was no longer just in the context of the kitchen and in the presence of food. And this did not ever occur in the yard. Well, nobody's cooking out there, and there's a lot more space. Dogs have a problem with what I call the contrivance of our homes. They belong with us. There's no debate about that. But we don't necessarily set them up for success by having structures that prevent them from escaping and avoiding and creating space. And walls and furniture and that kind of stuff do. So inside, these things were a problem for these dogs, in part because they couldn't get away from each other, and outside in the yard they did fine. Okay? So they had never become hostile towards each other when Susie was absent. Yeah, food was a factor, competition was a factor, but when Susie wasn't there and it was only Jimmy, no problem. And by the way, they were equally bonded to Jimmy, although Opie may have been over bonded to Susie because of the way he followed her around the house. Okay? So there'd never been any injuries between these two, but they had this frightening, intense aggression that had Susie extremely tense. And it wasn't doing this lady any good at all. Thank you for that heart. Okay? So here's what they had noticed. And somebody's asking me questions, which I will, let's see. And, Cindy, and, okay. So and Donna, you're here too. Wonderful. I'm glad you're here too. So what they noticed was that when Opie entered the house with Susie, walking in together, he would immediately scan and start looking for Ranger. Like Ranger was going to steal his lunch money. It's Opie who's the higher status dog, and he's not going to tolerate any insolence from his subordinate. Well, that's not a healthy reaction. It is appropriate for a high status dog to get first access, but it is not healthy for them to spend their life scanning and looking to pounce. Okay? And when Ranger noticed Opie, he would look away and lower his body posture, a clear indicator to his boss that, hey, I'm your subordinate, don't worry about me. But Opie would pounce on him oftentimes anyway. On the other hand, when Jimmy would take both dogs together on a leash walk, they did great. Okay? But when Susie accompanied him on the walk with the dogs would whine and cry more because they were nervous and agitated with this lady who loved them, and they loved her. Well, some people say, well, dogs only behave badly because, it's the person's fault. It's about the people. As though all canine brains are equally healthy. Well, they're not, any more than all humans are. Some people are pretty well adjusted and adaptable. Most of us are doing our best. And then there, of course, are people who suffer from mental illness, and in some cases so severe that they can't even function in society. So the brain, the most complex organ in the body, there's a great deal that can go wrong, and sometimes it goes really quite wrong. Now, many people and other pets and creatures respond well to treatment, but this is a very big field of study. So we were gathering details and information about these dogs and how they were functioning together, and my first important responsibility in these cases is to figure out, well, what are the motivators? Why is this stuff happening? Because the truth is that this fighting over food or fighting over proximity to people or being more agitated in Susie's presence, these are symptoms. Vomiting, diarrhea, coughing, sneezing, discharges, those are symptoms. The underlying cause, we have to find that if at all possible if we're going to treat any disorder successfully. So, what else was going on? Well, we found that the most tense situations were prone to occur following breakfast and dinner. Okay? Susie was home a lot during a recent 6-month period. This is before the epidemic, by the way, when she was unemployed. And there were a lot of tense times. And after I got talking to her a lot, she was just like mothering these dogs something serious, which it's okay to be nurturing, believe me. But she was doing it with, frankly, a great deal of her own anxiety. And these dogs, particularly Opie, who already had his own anxiety, was worsened by following her emotional lead. So yes, her behavior was part of the problem, but it wasn't all of it. Okay? So when they were in the house, if Opie was with Susie and Ranger came in, he would give the both of them a wide berth. He was subordinate to Opie. He didn't want trouble, but Opie lost control of himself at times anyway. So here's what we had to do. I explained and made it very clear that while Opie was the senior member of the pair, I mean, he was 9 years old, he'd been there much longer than Opie, and he was actually a bigger dog. Those can be factors in the hierarchy, but often not so. And Opie, the younger dog, he was the one with an anxiety disorder who he overplayed his hand. And so he was overbonded to Susie. He followed her everywhere she went. He just didn't know how to be independent because he was anxious, and he took security from being near her. She was anxious, and that made him worse. Okay? He was highly possessive of his proximity to his person, Susie. And he would display aggressive signaling toward Ranger because he believed that if Ranger got any access to Susie, that Opie would get none. It's back to that all or nothing thing, like food for many dogs, is that they're sure that if they don't get it all, they won't get any of it. And that's not healthy. Wasn't healthy for anybody. Does anybody have a dog named like Ranger, or named Ranger, but anybody have a dog like Ranger? Tony, look, baby. Do you want the little treat? Well, you can come up and get it. That's a good boy. So, here he comes again. This is his little habit. He goes around. Tony, look, baby. Tony. Psst, psst, psst. There. Good boy. We're reinforcing him for being calm. Would you care for a biscuit here? I know. I'd like it if he were in my... There, he's in my lap now. Good boy. Petting gently, reinforcing calm behavior. Okay. So, well, we're not going to pay any attention to that nonsense. Okay. So Ranger has done his best to signal Opie that he's willing to take a second position in some contexts, but Opie, of course, overdoes his corrections to his subordinate. While Opie is well adjusted in some situations, his anxiety is triggered by his, what we call the primary attachment figure, and that's Susie. And here's the problem that really began to develop, is that Ranger, the lower status dog, would sometimes, when seeing Opie and Susie together, would lash out and aggress towards Opie because he was getting in the first lick, because he was afraid for his life. That's how fearful he became. And some people see that happen with a lower status dog and they go, oh, he's standing up for himself. No, he's scared witless. Yeah, and things can really deteriorate from there. So despite the absence of fight wounds, this thing was getting worse, and we were just below threshold for serious injuries. And believe me, I, in my emergency work days, stitched up a whole lot of these. You don't want this, okay? So the trick here was avoidance of these arousal triggers. Food and the presence of Susie caused Opie to become immediately hypervigilant for, where's Opie? So I said, never allow these dogs to be together when there was food of any kind present. In other words, when they were cooking, only one dog was allowed in the kitchen and the other in a closed room in another part of the house or out in the yard. They had to change their management, okay? And when Susie wanted to interact with one dog, the other one had to be out of sight, so they couldn't swap body signals, or this thing can get worse. So I also explained to her that she needed to avoid these dogs if they started to become tense. In other words, she needed to leave the room. So often people want to say, you stop that, you cut that out, and people use this firm, reprimanding tone. You know, they don't say, no, Opie, no, Ranger, we'd appreciate it if you two gentlemen would, you know, relax and sing Kumbaya. No, people, you know, they use a firm tone, and that just ratchets the dog's agitation up another level. And what she really needed to do, because frankly, this was a person who had a real hard time calming herself, she needed to leave. Just get up and walk away. And when she did, these dogs just, oh, okay. What do we have to fight over? Well, nothing. The bone of contention is gone. And what this largely came down to was empathy. And I'm not suggesting Susie is not an empathic person. She certainly is. But when she was overwhelmed with her own anxiety, she was having a hard time walking a mile in Ranger's or Opie's moccasins. And you think, isn't that carrying it a little too far? I mean, these are dogs, a member of a different species. Oh no, but they have emotions that are very similar to ours, which is the big reason that they're man's and women's best friend. They share a great deal with us. So one of the things that I explained to Susie was, how do you think Ranger feels? Well, he's getting pounced on. He's scared to death a lot of the time. How can we improve that? Well, it's certainly not going to help to continue scolding Opie, because like literally everybody, she'd already tried that. That was a failure. You know, like Dr. Phil says, how's that working for you, right? Well, it doesn't work at all. So she had to say, all right, how are these dogs feeling? And often I find that I can bring out the best in pet parents if I can make it clear to them that if they change what they're doing, their pets are going to feel better. And that really made a difference for her. When she realized that Ranger would be much less frightened, and Opie would relax and frankly stop being such a bully if she left them alone when this stuff began. No longer inadvertently reinforced the behavior by responding to it. And they said, gee, where's Susie? Well, if we want to be with Susie, we have to earn that privilege by being calm. Well, that takes a lot of practice, and we set everybody up for success by making sure there was only one dog when they were cooking, and when Susie wanted to sit down and watch television with Jimmy or just cuddle and snuggle and share some affection, only one dog at a time. Now, I see this happen a lot. People, again, we think of our pets like little children in furry suits, and that's okay to love them that way. Believe me, that's really healthy because, well, that's the way we are at this house. But we have to realize they are members of a different species. And just like different people are different than I am and different than you are, and they need special consideration sometimes, and our empathy means that we have to say, hold it, you're different, aren't you? All right, I may not fully understand that, but I'm going to accept that, and I'm going to let you have your needs met and not mess things up by trying to require you to be just like me. Well, that really is a failure with pets because different species are different. So what I explained to Susie and Jimmy was that in order for these dogs to be set up to succeed, We needed to stop allowing them to push each other's buttons with the big bone of contention, Susie, playing into it. So to make it easy for everybody to get off on a good start here, when they were watching TV, they could choose one dog and have the other one out of sight and then trade later. So these dogs didn't compete anymore. And by the way, when they were together and they weren't with Susie, they were fine anyway. Okay? Now, needless to say, these dogs did have a food-related aggression problem. So twice daily feeding, same time, morning and night. And there's a particular feeding room for Opie and a particular feeding room for Ranger. And at that time, each dog was put into his room, door closed, he was isolated. And then Susie and Jimmy would go to a closed cabinet, take down the food bowls, because they were never to be left on the floor, even clean, because when dogs are together, they can associate a food bowl with food. It doesn't have to be real food. It can be an association that they've learned with repetition. So those food bowls are out of sight when those dogs are together. I take them down, measure the food for each dog, and go to the first dog's or whichever dog's feeding room, open the door, push that food bowl in and close the door, and go to the other guy's feeding room, however many dogs you have, open that dog's food room door, push the food bowl in, and let them have 10 minutes to eat, whatever, and then you figure everybody's done. You open one dog's food room door and open it and take out the food bowl, close the door, that dog's still in there, and go to the other guy's room, open his door, pull his food bowl out, close the door. They're still by themselves. And then you can take those food bowls, clean them, stack them, and put them up in the cabinet, close the door, and then they're back together. And the bottom line is that when these dogs are together, there is never food available, including treats. So here's a question, and it is Isabella. And our sausage dog Attila Honey von Senkow also sends his best from Vienna despite suffering the heat. Well, that's very kind. Thank you. You're so nice to do that. I love pets, and I love to connect with them even though they're doing it through their person. And Susan Lintz, thank you for coming. I'm just delighted that I've got all these people participating in this thing. So this case did go well. We did a lot of follow-ups, and I ended up having to continue coaching Susie, and her husband came, really nice man, Jimmy. And you got to be gentle with people. The last thing I wanted her to do was start feeling like, I'm being blamed for this. No, you're not, but everybody plays a part in this, don't they? So anyway, and by the way, these Facebook Lives, we post them on YouTube, and a lot of people watch some of these things. And by the way, if you cannot join me on a Thursday evening at 5 o'clock Mountain Time, you can subscribe to my website, which is drjeffnickel.com, drjeff, Nichol.com. At the bottom of the homepage, you can subscribe. You just put your email address in. Every Tuesday morning, you'll get the Facebook Live from the previous Thursday, and my newspaper column that shows up in the Albuquerque Journal on Friday mornings. You'll get that too. We call it the media blog. Makes it sound kind of important, doesn't it? And you'll get that stuff in your email box every Tuesday. And if there are any questions, by the way, feel free to go to my Facebook page and put it in there. And oftentimes it ends up in the media blog. But I like to help people and do the best I can. And by the way, just like I was mentioning to Portia, most Wednesdays at 4 o'clock, you can participate in a Zoom group conference. There are no more than 4 people or 4 families participate. Most are for dogs because, unfortunately, it's more dog people who look for help with behavior issues. I wish more cat people would, because cats are about equal in numbers as pets in our country. But anyway, we're doing one on cats coming up next week. Yeah, Wednesday the 30th. And there's still a couple of spaces available. So if you have cat issues, you're very welcome to go to my website, and you'll see right on the homepage you can click on individual consultations, which is largely what I do, in-depth diagnosis and treatment. But we can give people a lot of helpful information if they participate in a group. So you can click on that, and there's a calendar there. You can put your credit card in, and you can sign up. And there's one too many people that are still signed up because one person changed to an individual consultation. So there are actually 2 spaces left for the cat group next week. And so if you go to it and it says full, call my office, and we will get you in there.
Carla Iberg had a comment about
Carla.
jealousy.
Oh, yeah, Carla. Yeah, if you're holding a child in your lap, you know, that baby, it's not like Afro believes that baby is another dog, Carla. But in fact, one of the things that would happen with Susie and Jimmy, with their dogs, is that they shared with me that when they're affectionate and they're hugging and, you know, just sharing some healthy affection, that sometimes it was Opie who would try to push his way in. And people say, oh, that dog's jealous. Well, actually, what's going on is not that human emotion, which is ego-based. People get jealous. What dogs do are believing that, like the famine that's going to start in 20 minutes and the food will run out, well, there's going to be an end to human leader contact. Dogs crave that because in the wild, they know that if they don't get behavioral cues from their leader, they may not get to join the group and go out hunting and gathering resources or protecting resources, and they may be the one gets left out and dies. They're worried about that because in the wild it happens. So they have a very strong incentive to pay attention to the leader and earn interactions. And so you have a dog like Aphrodite, this beautiful English bulldog who Carla and Tom, her husband, have. And that dog says, oh, somebody's getting affection. It could be her husband. It could be one of the other pets in the home, like Smokey. Or it could be a baby. And that dog goes, and of course when we have babies, especially, you know, when we're grandparents, which we're not yet at this house, but we're hoping someday. And you know, you coo and you cuddle and you kiss that little baby, and the dog says, oh my goodness, I have to have that because it may run out any time. And so it's that scarcity thing, and that's that competition thing. And it is very natural when you're holding a baby to say to your dog, stop it, okay? And the dog comes away going, well, at least I earned a response from my leader. I'll go back to that job because there's a paycheck. And so as much as that's a very natural thing for us humans to do, don't do that with a dog. You ignore. And so as cumbersome as it is, Carla, the thing that I would do would be to put Afro in another room or on the other side of a baby gate so that you can enjoy that baby without being interfered with by a dog who competes, who believes that if she doesn't get a lot of that attention or all of it, she won't get any. It's a canine motivation that is frankly quite natural for them. So it's not really a behavior disorder, but I would set Afro up to succeed by putting her elsewhere. And Portia, there you go. She pushes down on the gate when no one's home. Well, right, and you know, Portia, your dog has a pretty significant separation behavior, and they get pretty frantic when they're left home alone. I know I mentioned through a dog's ear music and food toys yesterday, but I would also, and I know we talked about the medication that's already been started by your regular veterinarian, which may be perfectly appropriate, although there are some adjustments that can be made in that, or changes. But I also suggest installing a dog door, because dogs who can have a change of venue, if that dog gets kind of agitated in the house, she can go back outside or come back inside. And you can take those food toys, by the way, and you can hide them under furniture or beneath sofa cushions. You can build a digging box outside against the north side of your house, and I have instructions on that on my website, which is searchable. Just put digging box, and you, as I mentioned yesterday, we integrate a whole lot of changes in an attempt to make it easier for a particular dog like yours to succeed. And you may still need an individual consultation because your dog's got a pretty severe problem. And the last point, and I know I mentioned this too, I'm really going to urge you to go to the Calmer Canine website, CALMER, the letter K and the number 9.com, and order a Calmer Canine pulse electromagnetic field device. Again, not the solution, but a very good add-on for many of these dogs. And you want a video monitor. Either get a surveillance camera, or, again, as I mentioned yesterday, get one of these little $10 tabletop tripods that you can put your smartphone in and monitor that dog at least once a week. But these problems get worse, and that dog is getting frantic, and that's why she's knocking down the baby gate. The one thing I'm really glad you have not done, Portia, was, confine your dog to a crate. That is a very big mistake, and you wouldn't know it if you go to the internet, because not only will you find a lot of well-meaning people sharing advice like that, but when dogs with separation anxiety are in a smaller confined area, they get increasingly frantic and panicked, and they will do whatever they can to rip their way out of a close confinement, to the extent of fracturing their teeth and cutting their lips and breaking their nails. And don't do that. You'll even find on the internet these crates that are $800-900 that look like a vault, and they are marketed as escape proof. And it's like, where in the world did it become a good idea to take a well-loved pet and incarcerate them in a cell when they are losing their mind? They get a lot sicker behaviorally. So we never do that. And I know that you're keeping your dog in a utility room, which is a lot bigger than a crate. But again, if you could install a dog door and give your dog a lot more choices. We forget that. When we take them in as pets, they live in a building, behind a fence, they leave the property on a leash, all things that are necessary to keep them safe, but that is not how they're genetically programmed to behave. They are domestic pets, but all of them have the free-living survival programming, and none of that includes contrivances like living in a building behind a fence and being constrained by a leash and windows and stuff like that, which they don't understand. So if you got a nervous dog that's really freaked out when it's home alone, those things can be a bigger problem. And in many cases, I encourage people to take their dog with separation anxiety to a doggy daycare while they're away from home at work until our behavior modifications and management changes, and in severe cases, medication, have a chance to work. And that's my best bet, to not allow your dog to go through those ramp-ups. What else did I want to share tonight? I think that's most of it. So, Carolyn, are there any more questions? Did I miss anything?
Not that I saw, but I
Okay. All right, well, let me see if I can swipe left. All right, Portia. And she peers again this afternoon because of the weather. Yeah, right, too. Which one is better for cash? I'm not sure which one is.
Zoom group or consult.
Well, the Zoom group is much cheaper.
She's already been.
Yeah, and you've already done that. And you can come back to another Zoom group, and I can give you some help and try to advance this a little bit further. But there's nothing like my personal hands-on physical exam and observations, and having the time and the behavior questionnaire we have people complete to really dig down and understand the individual case. But I can still continue to help if you would like. And other Zoom group sessions in July, and you know what, Corrine? Carolyn and I were just talking about that, and we've gotten a little behind.
They'll be posted tomorrow.
They'll be posted tomorrow. Thank you, Carolyn. But you're right, we don't have those in there, and we need to. And in fact, we need to post them for August as well so people can sign up in advance. This is a new thing that we're doing, so we're sort of just getting our feet under us. But thank you for that reminder, because we didn't know, we got behind on that. So we're going to take care of that. So, you know, last point I guess I try to always mention this is take the time to set your pets up for success. Give them choices. Build a foundation of trust and choice and freedom before asking them to do things differently for you. Because, just like us, dogs and cats can become obstinate if their leader only wants their needs met. And people do that without realizing it. But you can make a change during any point in a relationship. Your pet can learn that they can trust you not to intimidate them, which frankly often happens purely unintentionally, purely by accident. And there was one more point here. Somebody said, thank you, Tony T. I'm looking under you here to read my... Let me move your rear end there, son. Attaboy. I think that's everything. Oh, thank you for highlighting important issues and helping all of us with our lovely pets. Isabella, you are right. And thank you for lovely pets. Because, let's face it, they can be, well, frustrating sometimes. Give yourself a break. You know, if you're really frustrated with your pet, you can put them in boarding for a day or two and then get some help. Almost every case, we succeed almost every time. We don't cure behavior disorders very much, but we make most of them better to the point where people can live with them, and we can share methods of making it easier to live with them. But don't lose your patience. If you feel that happening, you're only human. Put that pet in doggy daycare or your cat in boarding for a day or two. Take a break and get some advice. Good advice from a credentialed specialist. And that's largely what these Zoom groups are for. We are booked out several weeks in advance for consultations, but we can get people into the Zoom groups much sooner. So thanks everybody for being part of this with me. And speaking of sharing, I hope to see everybody next Thursday. Yeah, Thursday at 5 o'clock Mountain, and we'll do it again. And next week, we're going to do it on fireworks, which is a problem for a lot of scared dogs and a lot of scared cats. We will address all of that, so I hope to see you then.
6 o'clock Mountain.
6 o'clock Mountain.